So okay, got it. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Zara Castillo, Director for the Export Finance Assistant Center of Washington, and today's co-host and co-organizer. So I've met most of you, and I will go into details of what we do. So shipping of goods could seem risky for the unaware exporters. So today's strategies for achieving both the least total cost in international logistics, as well as how to choose your logistics partner, will be discussed. This whole session will be 1 hour long with 45 minutes of instruction from today's main speaker, Kelly Green, and the rest will be Q&A. So throughout the program, if you have any questions, please send it via the chat box. If we can easily answer them via chat, we will do so, but we will make sure to answer those questions at the Q&A portion. Just a few housekeeping to maximize the bandwidth. Please keep your video turned off and stay muted. You should have received today's slides from an email from Julie this morning. If you don't have them, please let us know and we will send it to you. And now I pass this on to my partner in crime, Julie Johnson from the Washington State Department of Agriculture.
Good morning, everybody. And again, thank you for joining us. I recognize a lot of the names, so it's really great. Again, I'm Julie Johnson, and I'm the Export Development and Outreach Trade Specialist at the Washington State Department of Agriculture. Briefly, I want to let you know that our program works with small to medium-sized Washington suppliers of agricultural and food products, fresh and processed, also beverages, nursery, hay, and pet foods. We work with suppliers at all stages of the exporting process. So please reach out to me with any questions or if you need any assistance, would love to work with you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to Kelly Green with Innovative Global Logistics Strategies.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? I guess it's morning for you. It's afternoon for me. I'm going to start my timer, Julie, so that, and Zara, so that hopefully I can get through this material in the next 45 minutes. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to all of you and for taking the time out of your busy schedules for today. Hopefully I'll cover some important topics that you can all take something away from. And if you do have questions, please put it in the chat and we will certainly try to get to all of those at the end. So a little bit, this is going to be about selecting the best logistics partners in global trade. Sounds pretty daunting to a lot of people, and it is a big topic. So forgive me if I go a little fast through some of the slides. Again, I'm a resource. If you have any additional questions after it's over, my contact information will be there. I'm always happy to answer basic questions should you have them. So briefly, the agenda, we're really going to talk about the importance of having a logistics strategy and some risk assessment. As you may have noticed, we've had a pandemic this last 18 months, which caught a lot of people by surprise and has really disrupted our supply chains. And really, there's no way for anybody to have predicted something like what we've seen. But having some sort of risk strategy that helps you prevent uncertainty in your supply chain is always necessary. And I think companies have more and more realized that. Really going to focus a lot on the criteria that you should look for in the right logistics partner. This is absolutely critical to your supply chain. Honestly, even with all the other resources that people put into it with their marketing and their sales, you can get all those things right. But if you don't have the right partner that can get your products to your customer in a timely manner and at a reasonable cost, you're already in trouble. So all the marketing and sales and the best product in the world doesn't do you any good if you can't deliver. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I believe is the right strategy for negotiating the best rates and service for your needs, and why you should have a seasoned logistics manager on your team. I realize a lot of you may be small and may not have somebody on your team yet. And if you don't have a logistics manager, there are consultants such as myself and others out there that often will assist you in that quasi logistics manager role as you're beginning until you can get up to speed and need to hire somebody full time. So keep that in mind. Briefly, I just want to touch on what logistics management is and what it isn't. There's this buzzword out there called supply chain management, and you hear it all the time with the disruptions in the supply chain. But it's very important to understand that logistics management is not the same thing as supply chain management. Logistics is a part of the supply chain. Logistics specifically is dealing with the storage and the movement of your goods and your services, whereas the supply chain is really an end-to-end process that includes the purchasing and the securing and everything, really, even in finance. It's one of the reasons I'm not in love with the term supply chain, because it really is an end-to-end process that includes a lot of different aspects outside of logistics. I am a traditional logistics person. Doesn't mean that I don't dabble in the supply chain and do other things, but my main focus is always on the storage and the movement of goods, whether it be by ocean, air, rail, intermodal, by truck, so over land, over water, over air, and your storage. And that's really what we're focusing on today, is how to find those right services in that area. There's a lot more to the logistics function than just what we think of as the tactical decision, I can say that, tactical decisions. It's not just about putting something in a truck, sending it down the road, putting it on an ocean carrier, sending it across the country, putting it in a warehouse. You actually do need a logistics strategy, and that's where so many companies are failing. Logistics is not a one-size-fits-all solution. I cannot tell each of you exactly how to do anything and give you a blueprint of here's what you do, A, B, C, D. The reason is your companies are as individual and as different as your products are from one another. And the right solution for you is not going to be the right solution for maybe even your competitor. It's all about what your goals and your company is trying to achieve. And your logistics solution needs to be tailored to that, not to what this company over here is doing. You can learn a lot from other companies and get a lot of good information, but having the right strategy and the right solution is very individual to you, just as your product is. I always ask this question: what would happen if your customer could do all of these things? If they could deliver a value faster to your customer, provide the same level of service, do all of these things with less cost, less inventory. You don't probably have to be a rocket scientist to look at this and say, well, geez, if my competitor could do all of those things, they're going to get the business. Absolutely. So the goal is for you to be this company. You want to be the company that everybody is looking to, so that they're going to try and catch up to you, not the other way around. You want to be the one that reduces your transaction costs, that provides the better level of service. That's how you gain market share. And again, why logistics and having the right strategy and the right suppliers is critically important. It is a competitive advantage. It is not just a cost center. As you know, and as you've seen on the news, the supply chain is constantly changing, and logistics has to be able to adapt and be flexible enough to service your customers. The companies that survive and thrive are the ones who have a strategy and they're able to pivot without the whole thing falling apart. I'm going to use an example here. Y'all know who Toyota is. Toyota is the pioneer, or one of them, of the lean manufacturing concept. And over my shoulder, I don't know if you can see it or not, I have my Lean Six Sigma certification. So I'm very big on the lean principles, and Toyota really pioneered so much of that. But let's go back a few years, and you may remember there was an earthquake in Japan that affected their nuclear plant and everything. Their entire supply chain shut down. And Toyota, which had been running on a very just-in-time inventory system where they had almost no inventory and everything just came in right in the nick of time, minimized their costs, increased their efficiencies. Well, that worked until they had a massive earthquake and everything shut down. And as a result, they had to shut down their manufacturing. They realized very quickly they needed to have what they don't like to propose is buffer stock. So what Toyota did, and they kind of kept it quiet, a lot of people didn't know this while they were still pushing lean principles around the world, Toyota was quietly stockpiling microchips and semiconductors. So if you've been watching the situation with automobile prices and the shortage of automobiles during this pandemic, what you've seen is prices skyrocketing because of the shortage of parts, such as these semiconductors. The one company that has weathered this storm better is Toyota, because after that earthquake, Toyota pivoted so that they didn't have to go through that again. They reevaluated, they stockpiled these parts. Now, you may have heard recently that they did shut down, but it took them 18 months before they ran out of the stock that they stockpiled whereas other companies were running out and having shortages long before then. Again, nobody could have predicted this pandemic to be as long or as painful as it has been in so many ways. But that shows you the importance of having a logistics system that you can adapt, that you can reevaluate from time to time, that it's not stagnant, and you constantly put into play things to protect you for the future. Now that we've talked a little bit about some of the supply chain and risk, I just want to point out again, you have to be able to pivot. Trade wars happen. We've gone through several years now with trade wars happening, and that has really affected probably some of you, for example. Certainly has affected on the import side, but it has also affected on the export side. I was working with a lumber company for a few years here in upstate New York, which is where I'm located. So for me, it's afternoon. And they had 60% of their sales to China. So as soon as the trade war hit, China, of course, slapped tariffs on commodities such as lumber, and they went from almost a zero tariff up to 25%. It absolutely killed their business. And because they had all of their eggs in one basket in China, it really hurt them as a company. And it forced them to start thinking more about not only the domestic market, but other countries so that they could diversify their portfolio. That's an important supply chain strategy, but it's also important from a logistics standpoint. The pandemic, again, wish it would end myself. I'm sure you all do as well. I'm tired of living in a bubble, but those are kinds of things that you have to be able to plan. What we're seeing now with the pandemic is more and more companies looking at changing their entire distribution network. Instead of having these longer supply chains all the way from China or to China, they're putting regional distribution hubs. They're setting up warehouses in various parts and in regions of the world so that they can more quickly respond to those needs in those countries instead of having to wait months and pay thousands upon thousands of dollars for ocean containers that they sometimes can't find. Those are some of the strategies that companies are starting to employ. These are the kinds of things you have to be thinking through. We've seen major capacity issues and equipment availability issues. Even now, it's very difficult. There's often a long wait to find an ocean container in any direction of the world, and prices are through the roof, a lot higher than they were just 2 years ago. In fact, I'll give you an idea, 2 years ago, I was able to move an ocean container from the East Coast of the United States to China for about $1,200 export. It's like $15,000 at times now. So it's extremely expensive. Steamship lines, not so much. We haven't seen too many bankruptcies recently, but a few years ago, we saw a whole lot of issues with steamship lines going bankrupt and containers being stuck out in the water and your inventory a floating mess. Those are the kinds of things you need to keep your eyes open for. And these are the things too that you have to have the right logistics partners for, because in logistics, it's not if things go wrong, it's when things go wrong. And the question is, do you have the right partner to help you? Someone that keeps their eyes open and sees things coming and changes with the regulatory environment, changes with the steamship lines. I knew that some of these steamship lines were in trouble, and I started shifting my freight with the client companies I had to other steamship lines. So we didn't have any problems, unlike some of my friends in logistics who had containers stuck out on the water for months. You do need to understand your supply chain, your total supply chain risk. I know I said I don't like the term, and I don't, but you do need to understand your supply chain from a risk perspective. And that risk can be, as we just discussed, anything. And your risk is dependent upon your partner's ability to respond, and to some degree, things that are within your control. We need to be able to see it coming. We need to have the capability to react to it, and you need to have the resilience to be able to see it through and create stability. Jack Welch, who is the former CEO of General Electric, had written a book many years ago called Jack Welch and the GE Way. It's a great book. And the one thing I kept taking away from this book, as many times as I've read it, is this quote: if the rate of change internally in your company is less than the external rate of change, the end is in sight. And that nothing could be truer when we're looking at things that have happened in recent years with the pandemic and trade wars. If you are not able to pivot, you're going to find yourselves in trouble. Logistics should not and I want you to hear me clearly on this, it should not be thought of as a cost of doing business. That's counterintuitive. Everybody thinks of it as a cost. How much is it going to cost to ship this? How much is it going to cost to warehouse this and my inventory carrying cost? There is that reality that it is a cost, but if you focus on the cost, you end up making poor decisions from a competitive standpoint. Your logistics strategy is a competitive differentiation. I don't know why I can't talk today. At the end of the day, it's what we were talking about in the beginning. If your customer can do things better and faster and cheaper than you, and that's not all about cost, but it is about efficiency. If they can do things better than you, they're going to win and they're going to get the customer. You need to develop a logistics strategy that is going to help you be the differentiator in your industry. The cost is secondary. You need to have the ability to deliver your goods on time to the destination that your customer chooses and in a manner that the customer has the seamless experience. Your success in global trade is heavily, heavily dependent on choosing the right freight forwarder and your logistics partners. Again, your sales and your marketing are important, but if your delivery and your service isn't there, your success ultimately won't be either. I know, for example, I love Amazon Prime because I can depend on it being here, but I order things from Walmart, and Walmart sometimes delivers it in a couple days, sometimes doesn't. So I only order from Walmart the things that I really need to get from Walmart. I order everything else from Amazon because the reliability is there. The wrong choice in your supplier can absolutely derail your global growth efforts. And the right choice can actually propel you. This is how important logistics is as part of your overall strategy. I will tell you that I've seen a lot of companies make the wrong choice because they go for the lowest cost provider as opposed to maybe the best partner. And that is what we're looking for. Are you looking for a provider or are you looking for a partner? Because there is a really big difference. You can let your fingers do the walking and find a freight forwarder. There's thousands of them, but they're not all equal and they're not all right for you. Even if they're good freight forwarders, they may not be right for you. You need to find a partner. So what should you be looking for when you're trying to select those best logistics partners? Now, I'm focusing a lot here on freight forwarding because regardless of what product you're in, if you're looking to export, you're probably looking at air and ocean shipments. If you're doing Canada or Mexico, you may be looking at trucks, but there's still a forwarding component, especially with Mexico. And if you are warehousing, a lot of these things that we're going to talk about also transfer into looking for overseas warehouses and things of that nature. So again, there's a lot of a focus here on the freight forwarding, but don't let that deter you from thinking about warehousing in the same context. You want to look for the network of offices and their agents, relationships with their carriers and other government agencies, both in the US as well as in the country that you're going to. Your customer service, and do they give you a dedicated person? Your size will dictate some of that, but you still want somebody who knows your account. You don't want to talk to somebody different. Oops, didn't mean to do that. What's their reputation and their financial stability, the services they offer, technology, their tracking visibility, their experience, and ultimately, do they also offer consulting and compliance assistance? You will need to be in compliance with US export regulations if you're exporting, and importing if you're importing. I know some of the companies I saw that were listed are doing a little bit of both. Doesn't matter how big or small you are. If you are importing and or exporting, you absolutely must comply with government regulations and have a compliance program. And all too often, this is overlooked by small and medium-sized companies because they think, I don't need that. I'm only doing a handful of shipments. You absolutely, I don't care if you're only doing one, you absolutely have to have a compliance program. And maybe, just maybe your freight forwarder has those services that they can assist you with. So quickly, let's go through some of these things a little bit more in detail. The network of global agents and offices. Now I mention this because there's a lot of different freight forwarders out there specifically. There are the huge freight forwarders. I'll use Kuehne+Nagel as an example. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat today. Kuehne+Nagel is huge. They have offices in pretty much every major country of the world. And most of those are company-owned offices. So they have a wonderful network. But here's the problem with using a big company. And I don't mean to diss Kuehne + Nagel, because by the way, they are a great freight forwarder. But any large freight forwarder is often focused more on their larger customers. If you're an SME, a small or medium-sized enterprise, sometimes your more personal service is going to come from another company that's a small and medium-sized freight forwarder. You're going to get that individualized attention. They know who you are. You know who your person is that you can talk to. You pick up the phone, they answer, they help you, they hold your hand a little bit more than a larger company. So there's something to be said for that. However, the downside with an SME that is also a freight forwarder is just like you, they don't always have all of the resources available to them. They may be a mom and pop shop that doesn't have a large network of forwarding offices around the world. That doesn't mean that they can't be the right partner for you, but you need to look very carefully at their ability to communicate to the offices in those foreign countries. Who are they going to pass the shipment on to? If they don't have a network, even if it's not their own network, but a network that they're tapped into, the communication is going to suffer. And that can really cause havoc on your supply chain. Things get stuck at the port. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So this is really critical that if you're looking for a freight forwarder, you're going to find a forwarder, whether it's a large one, a medium-sized one, or a small one, that actually has the communication with you, as well as the network of offices around the world that they can communicate with, so that there's a seamless transaction. The one thing that you do not want is to go with a small company, get a great low cost, but you have to chase that freight around the world and you don't know where it is, and your customer doesn't know where it is, and your customer's calling you and screaming, and you're pulling your hair out of your head, because there is nothing that will make you more frustrated with global trade than not having the right kind of supply chain partner that can really do an awful lot of this for you. They need to take this out of your hands, and you need to trust them. That's huge, and it's key. So these are some of the questions that you're going to want to ask them. Do they have an office or a network in other countries, in offices that they can do with? Do they know the regulations in those countries? Are they a large corporate forwarder or a smaller company? And at the bottom, you'll see on the slide, I said, notice that I didn't say that they're located near you. It's logical, and there is some benefit to having a forwarder that's right down the road from you, where you could show up at their office if you're really unhappy, but geographic location is actually not necessary. You could use a forwarder in New York. Now, there's a time difference, so that might be a problem with reaching them with your time difference. So usually you would pick a forwarder that is in your time zone, but it is absolutely more critical that you find the right partner, not where they're located. And there are thousands of forwarders for you to choose from. Do your homework, do your research, and take your time. Relationships with the carriers and government agencies. Now, again, I'll just give you a tutorial here for 30 seconds. To start a freight forwarding company is not terribly difficult. You have to get a couple of licenses, but you can actually start right here from my home office and not have all of these things in place. So this is really important. Just like the last slide, you need to know, do they have contracts, their own contracts with the carriers? Are they piggybacking on someone else's? And the reason I ask that is, if they're piggybacking, they're going to want to make money, right? So they're going to have a markup, but they're already paying a markup on somebody else who's charging them to piggyback. So the more layers of the supply chain, the more money you're going to be paying, and the less visibility. So you're going to want to find a freight forwarder that has their own relationships with the carrier base, and enough carriers that can service the lanes that you're looking for and give you some competitive advantage, good shipping schedules, good pricing. Do they also have strong contacts at government agencies globally? You want them to be known in a good way, not a bad way. You don't want them to have been audited and fined. You want them to have a good track record, and you want them to be in contact with US Customs and the Export Administration, and even agencies like Zara's and agencies like Julie's. You want them to know who to go to if they have questions, and have those resources and those connections. Likewise, in the foreign country, you want them to understand the regulations again, but you also want them to have relationships with those foreign offices and the government agencies in those countries. That will save you a lot of headaches when the product gets to the foreign country, if there's anything wrong with it and there's documentation issues, they need to know who to go to. If they don't, and they throw their hands up in the air, you could have your product stuck for weeks or months. And that costs you money as well in storage and demurrage. And do they have relationships with other providers of logistics? Even for services they don't directly offer, such as, do they have partner warehouses, and do they have consultants like myself that they work with, or trucking companies? Do they have a domestic base or a domestic partnership? Because there's almost always some sort of domestic trucking, either in the United States or in the foreign country, that's going to be involved. So do they have those relationships? Those are questions you're going to want to drive down to find out all the answers. Customer service. This is a key one for me. If I call and they don't answer and I can't get a call back, next forwarder. You want to make sure that you can reach somebody, especially if you have an urgent need in a timely manner. And do they have one way of doing things? And I say this because a lot of large freight forwarders have their own internal processes. This is the way they do things. Expeditors International is a great international provider, but they are very, very strict on how they do things. A lot of small and medium-sized companies have processes, but they're going to tailor the process to what you want and develop an SOP specifically for you. So that, again, might give those smaller companies an advantage. But it's totally up again to what are you looking for and what is important for meeting your logistics needs. Are they going to give you a dedicated contact person? I personally almost always ask for that. I want somebody who really knows my account and a backup person for when that person is out or should up and quit. I don't want to have any issues. I want a seamless transition if something goes wrong, or if somebody's out sick, decides to have a baby, they leave. Who knows, especially with a pandemic, anything could happen. You want to make sure that more than one person knows how to run your account. And are they going to help you? I know this sounds crazy, but you're not just paying them to move your freight from point A to point B. That's what we think you're doing, but they should be your partner. They need to be able to guide you on what documents are needed. They need to understand the regulations, and they want to be able to hold your hand. They might even be able to give you some advice on the proper Incoterm or their suggestions for Incoterms. And again, compliance issues. You want a company that is going to be there with you. Are they going to keep you informed? Communication is key. Price fluctuations, which happen quite frequently, capacity constraints, things that are happening in the market, in the industry, they need to keep you posted. They should be sending you monthly updates at the very least without you asking. And are they going to offer you a transparency in the pricing and update and offer rates regularly, especially if the rates drop? Now, we all know this is if the rates increase, they're going to be very quick to let you know that there's a rate increase. But what happens when the rates decrease? And they do. Maybe right now, not so much with the pandemic, but in freight, usually what goes up will ultimately come down. When things normalize and things get back, and who knows when that will be, but it's possible those freight rates are going to drop, and they could drop significantly. How are you going to know? You better have somebody who's going to tell you, and a trusted partner, because otherwise you're going to be overpaying at some point. You don't want to just pay when it's high. You want to be paying low when it's low. This is very important, especially I think in the last few years, so many companies have struggled financially, and freight companies are no exception. You want to know if they're profitable. You want to know if they've had credit issues. Are they growing? And do they have a plan in place to weather storms and shifts in the market conditions? And how did they do in the pandemic? Are they helping their customers? Because the companies that are doing well on the freight side right now aren't just doing well because the rates are high. They're doing well because they're a partner and they're not screwing people. They're working with them. A lot of other companies not weathering the storm quite as well. Do they have a good reputation, and will they give you references? Do they have any complaints against them? This is a Better Business Bureau search. And honestly, in today's market, a Google search. Do they have any violations with government regulations? This is very important. If they've been fined and penalized much at all, I mean, a lot of freight forwarders have a little ding here or there, but if they have big glaring regulation violations and fines and penalties, I don't care how cheap their freight is. That's the reason to run to the closest exit. Don't even think about doing business with somebody who has a government violation, because it could be your freight that they end up having a government violation with, and you will be somewhat culpable with that decision. You do not want to open that Pandora's box with getting audited with a government agency because your forwarder made a mistake. How long have they been in business? If they're a relatively new freight forwarder, doesn't mean they're bad, but they don't have the experience potentially, and maybe not even the network to be able to service you properly. And are there any reviews or testimonials, and can you verify them to make sure that they're legitimate? What are the services that they offer? Do they have any specialty markets or niche markets that they serve? And I'm going to point out this one because this is important when you do look at the pricing. There are some associations, and I'll use the Wine Shippers Association as an example. I'm assuming they still do this. I haven't checked. It's been a few years. But if you were a winemaker, there's the Wine Shippers Association that you can be a part of. And I think it's $100 a year. It may have gone up, but it wasn't very much. And they have a freight forwarder that they've contracted with. And that forwarder, because they do so much wine, they've got a volume discount that they've negotiated with the ocean freight forwarders for things that are wine. So you're going to get a better rate and somebody who understands your product line if you go through an association. When I was working with the lumber company, the Lumber Association also had a freight forwarder that I think there was two of them that did 90% of lumber exports go through these two freight forwarders in the United States because they have the volume. They get the prices so low. So even when the market is high, you can sometimes get an advantage by going through an association. And that's what I mean by a specialty market or a niche market. Do they focus on something? And moreover, do they understand the products that you are selling? So if they don't have any experience with agriculture products, they probably aren't the right forwarder for you because you are specialized product. You're going to want to find a forwarder at the very least that has dealt with products very similar to yours. And arguably this would be for warehousing and distribution as well. Are they an NVOCC? Now, NVOCC stands for Non-Vessel Operating Common Carrier. Not terribly important that you understand all that, except what an NVOCC is a freight forwarder that essentially is a steamship line. They don't own the steamship. They're kind of like a travel agent for freight, but they have their own paper that looks like they're the steamship line. And then that gets transferred over to the master bill with the steamship line. Is it critical that you go with an NVOCC? No, it is absolutely not critical, but you do want to find a carrier, again, that has good relationships and contracts with the carriers. And by the way, NVOCC is just for ocean. What mode of transport does the forwarder offer? Do they just do ocean? Because some do. Do they just do air? Because some do. Do they do it all? Can they offer you a seamless transition no matter where you're going in the world with every mode? That's what you want to know. And I would argue that while it's good to go with somebody who does just air or ocean, if that's the majority of your freight, it will come a time probably when some customer will ask you to move something in a different way, or you'll start going to a different country that might be Canada, for example, where you were going to go probably by truck. So it does benefit you to find one that can do more rather than less. Do they provide consolidation services? Really, this may or may not be relevant depending on your product. That would be where you don't buy the whole ocean container. Say you want to ship on an LCL and you want to ship just a few boxes. And they're going to put your stuff inside a 20-foot container or a 40-foot container with other people's product. That's a consolidation service, and it will save you money on LCL. Again, that's not for everybody. It depends on your commodity and how it's packaged. But if you do sell or want to sell in small quantities, that is probably a really good opportunity for you to save money because you don't want to pay for a whole ocean container. And again, do they offer warehousing and distribution here or around the world that can help you or have partners? Do they also do domestic? That's not a deal breaker, by the way, because a lot of international freight forwarders do not do domestic. And I would argue often they don't do it well. So sometimes I would advise you to find for a domestic company, a totally different company, rather than sticking all of your eggs in one basket. Do they also have a customs brokerage? This is more important if you are importing anything, even if it's the raw materials, but also can they do the brokerage services in the foreign country for you? If they don't offer that service, even if your customer is the one clearing the freight, which I would argue they should be, and they may have their own broker, but that is a service you might want to know if they offer, in case your customer might be new to importing in their country and they might not have any of this either. If you can offer your provider who has an import brokerage in their country, it gives your forwarder more business, which also helps you when you go to renegotiate your pricing. But at the same time, it's offering a service to your customer if they don't have their own provider over there. Although they would pay that service, just let's be clear on that. Hopefully they'd be paying their own service. And do they provide any consulting or compliance training? And what other value added services do they offer? This is on there because you might want, especially as you grow, you might want some reporting, some financial reporting. If you're a big enough company that you've got a financial officer who wants financial reporting and they're barking for it. A lot of freight forwarders will provide these things for you. Some of them charge. You say, I want to report. They're like, oh yeah, we can do that for $100. Well, why should you have to pay for reports? So those are really important questions. What kind of reporting do they offer? Do they offer tracking? What do they do that they can provide for you without adding more additional money? Is it already included? Your technology, I think in this world, we all know that you really need computers and a good computer system, online tracking system. Any reliable forwarder is going to have that at this point. They should have that and the ability for you to do that. Electronic documents in their tracking system is extremely important. And I'll tell you why. I joke that I actually developed this system and to some degree myself and another freight forwarder, we did, because we were one of the first to actually do this. We're going way back in my career now. I've done this for almost 30 years, but at one point I was at a company where I was the logistics manager and I had documents piled high that just kept coming in from all of the exports and imports. And I was just like buried and I didn't have a secretary or anybody to be able to go through them. And I said to the forwarder, can you just scan those inside the tracking so I can just print them when I have time and put them into an electronic file for my compliance? And they were like, well, yeah, let's work on that. And they kind of developed it. And so we joke, that forwarder and I joke that we should have probably developed a system and got a patent and made a lot of money because everybody's doing it now. And of course, we didn't think, we were just trying to solve our own problem. But I think this is a great way for you to keep your documents securely stored. And then you can incorporate that as part of your compliance program. It's a lot easier than getting mountains of paperwork on your desk. Plus, if they send it to you by a FedEx for your documents, you're paying $15 to $25 or more just to get a pile of documents on your desk that you could store electronically in the system with no fee. So I like that. I think you should ask for that. And again, back to asking them for custom reports, whatever you might want to see. And over time, you may decide you want to see an in-transit report to know where your inventory is or when it's being delivered to your customers. Those are really important things in tracking. You're going to want those reports. And is their technology connected to their agent offices overseas for seamless transfer of information? Again, if they don't own their offices overseas, do they have a network where they have a system set up for this? Or is it really kind of fax machine 1980s, because things get lost in translation very fast? Okay, my computer totally froze. Can you guys still see this, Zara or Julie?
Yes, we can still see the technology page. Okay, now we're at.
All right. I don't know. My computer, this technology froze.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm running out of time. Experience. I won't say too much about this, except I think we all know you really want to know if this company has been in business more than a few days. Have they been in business very long? Are they growing? Do they have, improvement goals? Or are they just happy doing the same old, right? You do want to know these questions. Are they prepared to deal with things such as port shutdowns? Do they have knowledge and experience? Customs issues, again, is more of an import. How did they handle the Hanjin bankruptcy situation? Now, the reason I asked that, Hanjin was a few years ago, but you want to know, were they prepared? Did they have a lot of shipments stuck around the world, or did they change their routing to avoid having shipments stuck in transit on the Hanjin? And really, how are they dealing right now with the COVID-19 situation? Now, any forwarder is going to tell you on the COVID-19, it's been a problem because equipment is a problem. So don't rule them out if they say that it's been challenging. But how are they trying to help their customers get through this and move their shipments in a faster manner? And what systems have they put into place? And, have they figured out with partnerships with or other freight forwarders and with the steamship lines for them to be able to cut some of the red tape and get you on vessels sooner? Those are the freight forwarders that are going to offer a little bit more of a value added than just picking somebody who says, well, it's tough for everybody. Well, yeah, it is tough for everybody, but what are you doing about it? Again, consulting and compliance assistance. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest, I'm biased, I'm a consultant, but consulting services with a freight forwarder, often a lot of companies are doing this now, where they're assisting you with offering training and seminars such as this one, where they maybe in person if they're local, or they even do a virtual on things like Incoterms or what's new with the regulatory market, because it's always changing and tariff rules are changing, and they're offering you training and understanding what's going on in the world that you're dealing with, because how are you going to stay up on top of all of this information? It's hard enough for somebody who's in the industry and logistics to keep up on top of it. And so a partner company that is going to help you understand and get through those things and help you be more productive and know when there's things coming or new regulation changes, and help you get your export compliance, and if you are importing, import compliance programs in order. And I want to just be really clear about compliance. Again, I said it earlier, if you're only doing one shipment, you still have to have a compliance program. That is a law, a regulation in the United States. And believe me, it is not worth you getting audited, fined, or penalized. The penalties range from a few $1,000s up to jail time. Not to scare you, but if you violate US export law and do something serious, even unknowingly, you're still culpable. The government, ignorance is not a defense under the law. You want to have a partner that helps you understand the regulations and help you get yourself into compliance. One really important note, your freight forwarder cannot be your compliance person. You cannot outsource the compliance function. You can use them for assistance and training. They can help you, but your compliance is ultimately your responsibility. So I just want you to know that, because it gets a lot of companies in trouble when they get audited and they're like, well, my forwarder does that. No, you have the responsibility under US law. Okay, I haven't said anything about price, and you're all probably sitting there thinking, gosh, she's running out of time and she hasn't even mentioned how to negotiate the price. One of the reasons that I wait to talk about price is because all of those other things are actually more important. If you don't have the right partner, the price is irrelevant. So I'm going to use the example of when you're looking for a new job. Sadly, I've had to do this a few times in my life, look for a new job. When you're interviewing for a new employee, if you were hiring, you probably have a salary in mind that you're going to offer to this candidate if they're the right fit. But if they're not the right fit, it really doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how much they want. That's why when I'm interviewing for a job and they always ask me, the human resource person always does the screening and says, well, what are your salary requirements? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Because if this is not the right job for me, or I'm not the right person for the job, the rest is irrelevant. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, right? You could go through an entire interview for a job and they could offer you $500,000. Let's just say it was a really good job. They offered you $500,000 a year, but you knew it was the wrong job. It's good salary. You might take it, but chances are you're going to keep looking, right? You're not going to be happy. Or you take a job and you're miserable because you went with it just for the money. Likewise, when the company is looking to hire an employee, sometimes they hire the wrong person because they got a great deal. The person said, oh, I only want $50,000 a year instead of 500. They're like, oh, okay, we'll hire this person. And then they find out really quickly, wasn't a good fit. We really didn't save any money because it was awful. Looking for a logistics partner should basically be the same thing. You want to make sure everything else is a fit. and then you worry about the price. Now, I've said that one of the things I do always recommend is that you start spot quoting with freight forwarders before you actually engage with anybody in any kind of a bid or RFP or conversation. And that would simply be picking a couple of the lanes that you're looking to move in and calling around at the same week. Okay, you don't want to spread this over time, especially with rate fluctuations as volatile as they are right now. But over a couple of days, you call a couple of forwarders and you give them some information and you spot quote it. Now, bear in mind, spot quotes are always usually higher than what you can negotiate based on your volume, but it will give you an idea of where the pricing is that you can be expecting, or maybe negotiate even a little bit lower if you have a volume. But beyond that, you really want to start your process when you do an RFP of any kind, looking for all those other things that we talked about and finding out, does this company scream partner to me or scream fast talking used car salesman that just wants my business to make some money? Because if they're screaming partner to you and they want to hold your hand and they want to help you, at that point you worry about the price and you negotiate the price. And hopefully if they're the right partner, they're going to offer you a good price as well. But again, the money negotiations in my mind should always come after the right partner. You don't want to get the wrong one. I don't like bids for this reason. Even in my consulting practice, I often advise clients who come to me, say, we want to do a bid for freight forwarding services. Can you help us? Well, technically, yes, I can. But I will always counsel my clients the exact same process that I just went through with you, because we need to find the right fit. Again, your partner will make or break you. If you don't have the right one, the price doesn't matter. They can put you out of business so fast. If they don't service your customer, you'll be shocked. Okay, your product can be great, but you'd be in trouble. So I really want you to understand that, well, bids, the traditional bid is very price driven, right? You throw it out there, you get your prices back. And then on the backside, you try to figure out if they're the right fit, or worst case, you only look at price. And then after you've gone through the implementation, you're like, well, that was a bad idea. And that's very time consuming for you as well as for your logistics providers. And again, the implementation can take time and there's often a lot of hurdles. So the more you can do in the upfront to find out if they're the right partner and they understand you and you them, the better off you're going to be. I just want to quickly say, because I know I'm down to like seconds here. Cheap doesn't mean low cost. What is the cost if you lose a customer? Because it's probably going to be more than what little bit you saved in the freight forwarding. And bids themselves are not about partnership. Again, partnership's not about the lowest price, and it's about finding a company that will be there when things go wrong in logistics. I'm sorry to say it, but it will. It's not an if it goes wrong, it is a when. Quickly want to just touch on this, and I know I'm out of time, Zara and Julie, but I just want to go through this, that rates fluctuate regularly, especially in ocean right now. And there's also a lot of accessorial fees that you need to consider. So if you do get a quote from an ocean provider and they tell you it's $1,200, your second question would be, what are the handling and other fees? You want to know every fee. And if a company comes back to you and says it's $1,200 all in, you still want clarification. What does all in mean? Because chances are it isn't all in. There's still something left out on the other side. Your Incoterms are going to drive some of this when you negotiate for your freight rates. So you want to make sure that you've picked those Incoterms. That is totally a separate topic from this, but they will also drive what you're looking for in your pricing. General rate increases are, and peak season surcharges in ocean are common. So even if you are given a rate today, I can promise you that rate will not be the same. And this is one of the problems with doing business internationally, especially with the shipping. Locking in the rates is often difficult to do unless you have a significant volume of freight. And a lot of newer companies in the import-export game do not. Quickly, should you select the freight forwarder and pay for the freight, or should your customer, or if you're importing, your supplier? My rule of thumb is always that you should be the one to control as much freight as possible. You want to get all the volume buying you can. So if you're controlling the freight, you've got the volume, you want more visibility in your shipments, you avoid diversion to possible embargoed countries that it shouldn't be. And your freight can ultimately be a profit center. You can legally mark up your freight. However, in agriculture products, as I'm sure some of you know, it's very hard to make a big profit as it is on your agriculture products. So marking up the freight might make it less competitive. So you want to be very careful, but you can legally do it. No, the customer, even if they handle all of the arrangements of the freight and they pick it up at your door, it does not eliminate your compliance obligation. You still have a compliance obligation simply by selling to a foreign entity, whether you do one thing with the freight or not. And I also just want to point out real quickly that given the current environment that we are in right now with COVID, it might actually be to your advantage to not control the freight, even though the traditional rule is, simply because there are so many wide swings in the freight. If your customer wants to arrange the freight and take the risk with the up and down rates, that might be to your advantage in the short term. But again, I think long term, you should probably be the one to control the freight for a whole host of reasons. One other quick question, comment. Some of you, I think, are importing. I noticed on the list of companies, there was at least one company that imports and re-exports. You might want to consider doing foreign to foreign shipment, which means sending it directly from the foreign supplier to your customer, and the right freight forwarder will know how to do that. And I want you to keep those in mind. By the way, feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions, because I have gone so quickly through this. I would be more than happy to answer any questions. You might need some special documents, specifically with agriculture products, a certificate of free sale. I know a few years ago, I was working very hard at exporting some agriculture products from New York. And at that time, nobody knew what a certificate of free sale was in the government. Now, New York State actually has a whole web page to get one. But it's really just a piece of paper that the government, usually the state, will provide to the foreign buyer that says that your goods can freely be sold in the United States and in your territory, and basically that it passes all of your FDA and regular regulations. They want to know it's safe, but it's just a piece of paper a lot of countries are asking for. Inspection certificates are common, and they will almost always ask you, especially foreign countries right now, they want to know that there's no GMOs. There's no genetic modification to these, and they're going to ask for a certification. Some countries have inspections on arrival, just like we do with a lot of our products that have to go through USDA and FDA inspections, depending on what they are, because the countries are trying to protect their people. You're also going to want to know about tariffs and quotas and restrictions, and labeling requirements often have to be not only what's in it, but sometimes in a foreign language. Okay, if you need government assistance, your first stop should always be with Julie, the Washington State Department of Agriculture. And the reason is simple. She knows how to put you in touch with all of these other resources, and probably even a whole lot more than I've listed here. So she can certainly be your one-stop shop for a lot of this. But some of the other ones that are here, Foreign Agriculture Service, and the USDA has a marketing service. There are some wonderful programs, I will add, if your product has at least 50% US content. There are some wonderful trade programs and assistance for things like trade shows. I'm sure Julie has already informed you of those. I've had a lot of clients participate in those, and they're wonderful. So you really should do. Even the buyer's missions that come to the United States, so you don't have to go anywhere, are absolutely fantastic. I did one representing some companies in Boston a few years ago, and it was amazing. And most of the US embassies have either a foreign agriculture service or US commercial service, or both, but not all embassies do. So keep that in mind, especially in a lot of the smaller countries. I was telling Julie and Zara the other day, Korea in particular is wonderful. If you're going to Korea, if anybody is doing that, I don't know if they still do it, but they were putting out a newsletter every quarter, and you can basically give them your profile of your product and they'll put it in there. It's free advertising. So if they're still doing it, that's a great service. I obviously am a logistics consultant, and I've been a logistics manager for many years and worked with many companies. And why, of course, I'm somewhat biased that you should have one on your team. If you are not in a position, if you're not big enough to hire one, as I said, you can always hire consultants or part-time people that, gosh, you can find them in a wide variety of places that can do ad hoc service for you, be there as a guide. But you should have somebody on your team that you can rely on to help you with all of these things. And that's it. I'm not going to go into a sales pitch because that's not what I'm here for, but just to let you know, I am a full service logistics company and my contact information is here, and you are more than welcome to reach out to me. And I will do my best to get back to you with an answer as quick as possible. I do free basic questions. I don't charge for basic things, especially if it's related to this particular session or any other basic questions I might be able to help you with. If it's a detailed project, we would have to talk about contract, but I think you all understand I'm not doing 20 hours of work for free. But other than that, I'm more than happy to be a resource for you. And again, any weak link in the chain will cause it to fail. If you have any questions, I would be more than happy to take them. And so sorry, I went a little over, Zara.
No problem, Kelly. These are great information that you
I
provided.
talk fast.
No, I mean, we have the recording, but yes, like these are great advice, practical information that everyone needs to know. So we do have 2 questions in the chat box that I'm going to read out right now. So first one is, I've been told that shipping from China to Tacoma has increased 10 times. So from $2,500 to $25,000 now. But a large number of containers back to Asia are going back empty. So approximately, what is the container shipping charge to Asia from Tacoma or West Coast? Is this something that you could answer?
Well, I wouldn't want to give you an exact price because I haven't checked
Or
it
like an
recently.
estimate?
Well, what I will tell you as a rule, it always has been more expensive to ship from Asia to the United States than backwards, even before this last big surge. Okay, because historically we're an import nation, right? We import. Those container ships come over here full, and they have always gone back empty. So the rates to go back have always been significantly less, which does work in your favor because you're exporting, not importing. So it does work in your favor. The rates will be less. I don't off the top of my head know what they are. I've seen some rates in the 9,000 rate from the West Coast, but that would be a question we would have to spot quote with a forwarder to get you an exact rate. But you are correct when you're saying about 25,000. We were just talking with, it's not funny, but we had a client the other day who called us and said, I'm in a bind. I need to get some containers from Asia to the United States for the Christmas season. And I'm a little bit sarcastic. And I said, which Christmas? 2023?
Right.
Because we're already booking containers from Asia for 2022 Christmas. So it is that far out for import. It's just ridiculous. You can't get containers. And they right now are in the $25,000 to $30,000 range, depending on the commodity and the origin and destination. They are through the roof. Export is a little less. Again, you're right. The ships are going back empty. Here's the problem though. If you've looked or read anything about the West Coast, right now there's ships parked off the coast. They can't get them unloaded fast enough and get them in because there's a shortage of workers even at the ports. So there are ships that are delayed getting in and getting offloaded. So even though they're going back empty, they're turning those ships fast. So it's not that they won't take the freight if it's already there and they can get it on, but that is still driving the price up because they're prioritizing what they're going to put on that ship. So the space is limited only because of the time to turn the ship, not because there's not space on the ship. So it should be less, but I would not want to give you an exact price without calling a forwarder. I would get myself in trouble.
Okay. Next question, how do we determine compliance requirements?
Great question. Export.gov, if you're looking at your export requirements, is a really great resource to start. There's also lots of training videos and other things that are on there. So it's a really good government resource. I will give you the highlights of the very basic things right now that you need to know for government compliance. First of all, you need to have a compliance program. And what that really entails is that you need to have a manual that says, here are your processes, who's in charge of what, and some basic things. And last time I checked, I believe on export.gov, I think that's where it is. There's a template for a very basic manual. It's like a 5-page, the very basic things that you need, and you can print it, fill in the boxes, and at least have a compliance manual. Now, I will say that that's a living document. It's not a one-time document. Anytime you make any changes to your processes, you need to update that with an addendum. It's not like throwing out the old, you just put an addendum in there. It's a living, breathing document. The same is true on the import side, but since we're talking exports, I'm going to focus a little bit more on that. There's also a lot of resources through the U.S. Commercial Service and the Department of Commerce in terms of the denied parties screening list. Every company is required to do denied parties screening. What a denied party is basically anybody who's not friendly with the United States. Everybody assumes it's a terrorist organization, and that is true, but it can also be somebody who hasn't paid their taxes. And so you would be surprised who's on that list. It could be anybody who has violated any one of many government regulations that has nothing to do with importing or exporting. It could be the IRS, could be anything. So if they are on the denied parties list, you cannot legally sell to them. When you are entertaining a new customer, you should always check the denied parties list first. It does change all the time, daily at least. And your freight forwarder, by the way, can do a denied party screening for you. But back to what I said a few minutes ago, your forwarder cannot be your compliance screening. And often they do the denied party screening. Your forwarder will do it at the time of shipment, but here's the problem. You cannot wait until the time of shipment to do it. If you do it at the time of shipment and you've already tendered the load and your forwarder does it, it gives a red flag, and it's basically an attempt to tender a load to a denied party, and you can be fined. So you want to make sure that you have a process in place to do that ahead of time. It is very laborious. There are some software companies out there that you can pay for the software to do it. And if you don't have a ton of transactions, it's not terribly expensive. And that then goes to your compliance, showing that you're doing your due diligence. The government looks for due diligence and reasonable care. If you are trying your best to be in compliance, it will go a long way if you ever end up in court. The people who end up in jail are the people who are fraudulent. They know they're doing something wrong and they didn't care. And they did it anyway, and they did things and they tried to skirt the regulations. Though that's a pretty high threshold for fraud, but just so you know, it exists, and there are companies that will sell at any cost. We saw this a little bit actually with the trade war. They were just like, we don't care. We're going to sell and we're going to lie about where it came from. And that's a very dangerous game. You can get yourself in an awful lot of trouble. I will just say this: importing and exporting, everybody says, well, it's my right. No, the Constitution of the United States is for individual rights. As a company, you do not have the right to import or export. It is a privilege. And sadly, it is one that can be taken away from you. That is one of the penalties, is you can be banned if they find that you haven't complied. You can be banned for up to 5 years for any importing and exporting activities anywhere in the world. So again, you'd have to make some pretty major mistakes for those things to go into place. So I don't want to scare people. I just want people to understand that this is why it's important that you try to get your manual, do your denied party screening, make sure you're looking at the OFAC list, which is a list of countries that you cannot sell to. They are the obvious ones. Iran.
So we're going a little bit over time, but I do have one more question.
Sure.
But aside from that, I did put the link for the trade.gov site
Perfect.
and the BIS site for the denied party list. One great presentation. One question: how do you check if a company has violated government regulations?
As a freight forwarder, you can actually find that out through the Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, because they are the ones that oversee the logistics as well as your compliance. Freight forwarders are subject to the same kind of compliance, but slightly higher than you are, because they're supposed to be the experts that know. So they do also have their compliance, and you can find out from the BIS if they've had any regulations. And honestly, a Google search also usually works pretty quickly to find out, because it usually makes a lot of headlines when somebody has been fined. Usually a big fine is pretty well known. Again, if it's something simple, they forgot to dot an I, cross a T, and it's one out of 25 years of history, probably not a really big deal, because we are human, mistakes happen. But if you start to see a pattern where they've been violating a lot of different regulations over one a year, it might be the one that you'd want to avoid. They won't stay in business very long.
Great. So I think that's it for all our questions right now. We did go over time.
I know.
I
always do.
It's okay, but everyone's say, if you guys have any questions, feel free to add it in the chat box. And then Julie, I see Julie pop up. So Julie, any words you'd like to share?
Just thanking everybody for joining us. So this has been great information. Thank you, Kelly.
I talk too fast. There's too much here.
So much great information.
Well,
Okay.
like I said, if there's any other questions, people are more than welcome to reach out to me. You guys could reach out to me if they reach out to you with questions. For some reason, they lose my information. And if there's any other topics that you want me to dive deeper on, just let me know. I can certainly do that.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Gosh, like,
you.
I mean, I believe that everyone found this useful. Everyone stayed, even now we're at overtime. Oh, I have one question. Will we be able to have a copy of the recording to share with other team members?
Well, that's up to you guys. You recorded it.
Yes, we'll be able to share that with you, Shantae. Any other questions? Great. Well, oh, okay, perfect. Well, again, thank you for coming today. Thank you for carving out an hour of your time today to spend with us. And hopefully this was something that was in particular interest for you. But if you have any questions or comments, let us know. And you guys have all our contact information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.